The Galactic Council chamber hung in the silent dark of space, orbiting the neutral world of Kesar Prime like a silver shell wrapped around a secret. Inside, the air shimmered with the low hum of translation fields and the soft rustle of dozens of alien species shifting in their seats. Some stood on too many legs, others floated in nutrient-filled globes, and a few communicated through pulses of colored light. It was a place built for compromise, for patience, for the slow turning of galactic wheels. But today, that calm was about to shatter. At the human delegation's station, Leo Grant stood perfectly still. He wore the standard dark gray diplomatic uniform, simple, unadorned, no medals or rank pins. His hands rested lightly on the edge of the podium, knuckles pale. Beside him, Marilyn held a slim data slate against her chest like a shield. Her dark eyes flicked across the chamber, taking in the Zarathi envoy's twitching antennae, the slow, deliberate blinks of the Marathi representative, the nervous tapping of the Sylph delegate's clawed fingers. She knew something was coming. Leo hadn't slept in 2 nights. He'd barely spoken since they left Earth orbit. The presiding magistrate Vexilorn of the Marathi rose from the central dais. Its gelatinous form pulsed a soft amber, the color of formality. Through the universal translator, its voice emerged as a calm, genderless murmur. The Council now invites the Terran Federation to present its quarterly report on interspecies cooperation and border stability. A hush fell over the chamber. All eyes turned to the human station. Leo took a slow breath. He didn't look at Mara. He didn't scan the crowd. He simply stepped forward, tapped the comm panel once, and spoke. Effective immediately, the Terran Federation is withdrawing from all diplomatic engagements with the Galactic Council. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the chamber erupted. The Zarathi envoy let out a sharp, chittering cry. The Sylph delegate flared its wing feathers in alarm. A low-frequency groan vibrated through the Marathi delegation as their collective form darkened to deep violet. Shock, maybe even fear. Murmurs swirled into shouts, then into overlapping demands for clarification. Translators struggled to keep up as a dozen languages collided in confusion. Leo didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't offer an apology or an explanation. He simply turned away from the podium, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. Mara hesitated for only a second before following, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes on her back, some angry, some confused, some calculating. As they walked down the long aisle toward the exit, the noise behind them grew louder. Someone shouted, "Why?" Another voice, deeper and rougher, demanded, "Is this an act of war?" But Leo kept walking, his expression unreadable, his pace steady. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer silence that followed once they passed through the sealed doors and into the corridor. The hallway was empty, lit by soft blue strips along the walls. The distant thrum of the station's life support systems filled the space where voices had been. Mara finally broke. "Leo, what just happened?" He stopped and turned to her. For the first time in days, his eyes softened. "We just told the truth," he said quietly. "They've been using us, manipulating our votes, blocking our trade proposals, whispering lies about our colonies. They pretend to welcome us, but behind closed doors they call us the loud newcomers and the reckless primates. We played their game for 50 years. No more," Mara swallowed. She'd seen the intelligence reports, fragmented, coded, but damning. Evidence of secret meetings between the Marathi and Zarathi. Trade embargoes disguised as safety protocols. False flag incidents blamed on human freighters. The Council wasn't a union of equals. It was a hierarchy, and humanity had been placed firmly at the bottom no matter how many peace treaties they signed or how much aid they gave. "But what now?" she asked. "They'll panic. They'll retaliate. Let them," Leo said. "Earth doesn't need their permission to exist. We've built our own jump gates, our own defense grid, our own alliances with the fringe systems they ignore. We don't need a seat at their table if the table is rigged." They reached the shuttle bay, a small Terran vessel, the Diplomat's End, waited with its ramp lowered. 2 security officers in plain uniforms stood at attention. No fanfare, no farewell ceremony, just a quiet exit from a stage that had never truly accepted them. As Leo stepped aboard, he paused and looked back one last time down the empty corridor. Somewhere beyond those walls, the Council was in chaos. Species that had relied on human mediators to settle old feuds would now have to face each other without a buffer. Trade routes that depended on human oversight would stall. The fragile peace in the Vexus sector, held together only by human peacekeepers, might collapse within weeks. He felt no joy in that. Only resolve. Inside the shuttle, Mara strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. The pilot, a young man named Jake, gave a quick nod. "Ready when you are, sir." Leo sat down, fastened his harness, and said, "Take us home." The engines hummed to life. The ramp sealed shut. With a gentle push from magnetic clamps, the shuttle detached from the station and arced away into the star-strewn black. Behind them, Kesar Prime grew smaller, then vanished into the distance. On the bridge, no one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The message had been delivered. The galaxy would have to adjust. Back in the council chamber, the chaos had not subsided. Vexlorn called for order, but its voice was drowned out by rising tensions. The Krell envoy accused the Sylth of planning to exploit the power vacuum. The Zorathi demanded an emergency session. The smaller species, those with no fleet, no weapons, no voice, huddled together in fear. For the first time in decades, the council felt less like a government and more like a house of cards in a sudden wind. And at the center of it all was an empty human podium, silent and still, as if it had never been occupied at all. No one knew what Earth would do next. But one thing was certain. The age of human diplomacy within the council was over. What came after would be written not in treaties but in actions. And the galaxy, so used to dismissing humanity as noisy, emotional, and short-lived, was about to learn just how wrong it had been. 6 months after Leo Grant walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, the silence from Earth had grown louder than any speech. Across the galaxy, the absence of human diplomats left a void no one had expected. Trade convoys that once moved smoothly through shared lanes now idled at inspection points, delayed by new rules written in haste by nervous bureaucrats. Minor species who had depended on Earth's neutral voice to settle border disputes found themselves shouting into an empty room. The Council, once proud of its unity, began to crack along old fault lines. On Earth, the decision weighed heavily on everyone. In Geneva, President Nora Hayes sat in her private office overlooking Lake Geneva, the morning sun glinting off the water. Her desk was covered in reports, economic forecasts, military briefings, intelligence summaries. She rubbed her temples, exhausted. The public had been divided at first. Some called the withdrawal brave. Others called it reckless. But as the weeks passed and the galaxy's instability grew, more people began to understand. Earth hadn't left the table out of pride. It had left because staying meant slowly being choked. General Paul Dawson stood by the window, arms crossed. He was a broad-shouldered man with a sharp jaw and eyes that had seen too many quiet crises. "The Krell are testing us," he said. "They've doubled patrols near the Cygnus border. Not officially hostile, but close enough to rattle our freighters." Nora nodded. "And the Council?" "They're pretending it's not happening," Paul replied. "Chair Vexilorn issued a statement calling for renewed dialogue, but no one's reaching out to us. They're too busy blaming each other for the mess." At that moment, Secretary Diane Ruiz entered without knocking. Her face was tight with worry. "Madam President, we just got word from the Vexus system. The peacekeepers pulled out last week as ordered. Yesterday, the Krell and Sylth opened fire on each other over a mining outpost on Vexus 3. Casualties are high. Refugees are flooding into neutral zones." Nora closed her eyes. Vexus had been stable for 10 years, only because human observers were there watching, mediating, sometimes just standing between two angry fleets with nothing but a radio and a flag. Now, without that presence, old hatreds had flared like dry grass in a wildfire. "Did anyone ask us to come back?" she asked quietly. Diane shook her head. "No." The Sylth sent a message to the Council. The Krell accused the Sylth of lying. "The Council is holding emergency talks. Without us," Paul grunted. "They want us to fix it, but they won't admit they need us." Typical. Nora stood and walked to the window. The lake was calm, but she felt anything but calm inside. "We knew this would happen," she said. "We hoped it wouldn't be this fast. But we can't go back, not now, not after what Owen found." Owen Pierce, a quiet xenolinguist working deep in the archives of the Interstellar Communications Bureau, had spent months analyzing old council transmissions. Buried in layers of encryption and diplomatic noise, he'd found something chilling. coded references to Operation Iron Veil. At first it seemed like routine strategy, but as he dug deeper the truth emerged. The Marathi and Zarathi had been coordinating for years to isolate Earth, blocking human proposals, spreading rumors about human aggression, even sabotaging trade deals with neutral systems. The Council hadn't just been unfair, it had been working against them. Mara Lin, now promoted to special liaison between the President's office and the Defense Council, had delivered the full report to Nora 3 weeks ago. It was enough to make even the most idealistic diplomat reconsider trust. Back in Geneva, the conversation turned to what came next. "We can't just sit here while the galaxy burns," Diane said. "Even if we don't rejoin the Council, we have to do something. Our colonies are out there. Our citizens, we are doing something," Paul said. "Fleet Command has quietly moved the 3rd and 7th carrier groups to the Orion perimeter. Not aggressive. Just visible. Let them see we're watching," Nora nodded. "Good, but no provocations. No grand statements. We stay quiet, but ready." Meanwhile, on Mars, in a sealed facility buried beneath the red dust of the Tharsis region, engineers worked around the clock. Project Aegis, a planetary defense shield capable of deflecting energy weapons and cloaking entire fleets, was ahead of schedule. Dr. Helen Cho, the lead scientist, had pushed her team relentlessly. "If they think we're weak because we left the table," she'd told her staff, "let them try to hit us." The project was top secret. Even most of Earth's government didn't know its full scope. But Nora did. And she knew that if things went truly wrong, Aegis might be the only thing standing between Earth and invasion. Out in the outer colonies, the mood was different. On New Carthage, a human settlement near the edge of known space, shopkeeper Ben Carter watched the news feeds with growing unease. Prices were rising. Ships were late. His daughter's school had canceled its exchange program with the Sylph Academy. "Feels like we're being cut off," he told his wife over dinner. "Like we're becoming strangers to the galaxy." But others saw opportunity. Captain Eli Brooks, commander of the freighter SS Marlowe, had always hated Council inspections. "Good riddance," he'd said when he heard the news. "Now we can trade where we want with who we want." He'd started running cargo to independent systems the Council had ignored, places like the Helios Belt and the Drift colonies. Business was better than ever, yet not everyone was so lucky. On the border near Krell Space, things were getting dangerous. Eli didn't know it yet, but his next run would take him too close to a disputed zone, and the Krell, eager to prove their strength in the new power vacuum, were looking for a target. Back on Earth, night fell over Geneva. Nora sat alone in her office again, the city lights reflecting in the glass. She thought about Leo Grant, now retired to a quiet cabin in the Pacific Northwest. She thought about the millions of humans living on distant worlds, unaware of the storm gathering around them. And she thought about the galaxy, a place that had welcomed humanity with open arms, then slowly closed those arms into fists. She made a decision.
"Send a message to all Terran embassies and outposts," she told her aide.
Effective immediately, suspend all non-essential contact with Council-affiliated entities, redirect humanitarian aid through independent channels, and increase surveillance on all known Marathi and Zarathi assets near human space. It wasn't war. It wasn't surrender. It was something in between. Something new. The galaxy had expected Earth to beg for its seat back. Instead, Earth was building walls, not of stone, but of silence, strength, and secrets. And somewhere out there, a freighter named Marlowe sailed toward trouble, unaware that its fate might become the spark that lit the next chapter in humanity's story. The SS Marlowe drifted through the quiet dark near the Cygnus border, its hull scarred from years of hard runs and harder landings. Captain Eli Brooks stood on the bridge, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug. His crew, 8 men and women who'd followed him through asteroid fields and pirate raids, moved with the easy rhythm of people who knew their jobs and trusted each other. They were hauling medical supplies to a free colony on Helios Minor, a place the Galactic Council had never bothered to map, let alone protect. To Eli, that was perfect. No inspections, no tariffs, no lies wrapped in diplomatic language. But today, the silence felt different. The comms had been quiet for too long. No chatter from nearby freighters. No automated beacons, just static. Something's off, said Rosa Mendez, his first mate, her eyes fixed on the long-range scanner. I'm picking up Krell signatures. 3 patrol cutters, holding position just outside the neutral zone. Eli frowned. We're not in their space. We're on a legal trade route. Legal according to who? Rosa muttered. The council's rules don't mean much out here anymore. Before Eli could reply, a sharp tone cut through the bridge. Red lights flashed. They're hailing us, said the comms officer, a young man named Dev. Put it through, Eli said. The screen flickered to life. A Krell commander filled the display. Scales dark green, eyes narrow, voice rough like grinding stone. Terran vessel Marlow. You are suspected of smuggling restricted technology to enemy factions. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Eli stared. We're carrying medical kits and water purifiers. Nothing restricted, and we're in neutral space. The Council has granted us authority to inspect all vessels in this sector, the Krell said. Comply or be treated as hostile. Eli's stomach dropped. The Council had done this. They'd given the Krell more power in the chaos, hoping to keep order. Instead, they'd handed a weapon to a species with old grudges and new ambitions. We're not resisting, Eli said carefully, but we demand to speak to a neutral observer. There are no neutrals here, the Krell replied. Shut down your drive now. Eli looked at Rosa. She gave a small, grim nod. Fighting was suicide. They were a freighter, not a warship. So he gave the order. The Marlow's engines fell silent. Minutes later, armored Krell soldiers stormed the bridge, weapons raised. They cuffed the crew, dragged them onto a shuttle, and left the Marlow floating, empty and dark. Back on Earth, the news arrived 12 hours later, via a scrambled emergency burst from a passing independent trader. President Nora Hayes was in a strategy meeting when the alert came through. Her face went pale. They took Eli Brooks and his crew, she said, her voice low. On false charges. In neutral space. General Paul Dawson slammed a fist on the table. This is exactly what we feared. They're testing us, seeing if we'll blink. Diane Ruiz, now working closely with intelligence, added, the Krell filed a report with the Council claiming the Marlow was carrying plasma cores meant for Sylth rebels. It's a lie. Our cargo logs prove it. But the Council won't care, Paul said. They'll use this to paint us as reckless smugglers. Nora stood and walked to the window. Rain had begun to fall over Geneva, streaking the glass. Send a formal request for their release, she said. Cite the Neutral Transit Accord. Cite every treaty we signed before we left. The message was sent. Polite, precise, human. 3 days passed. No reply. Then on the 4th day, the Council issued a statement. It acknowledged the detention but claimed the matter was under internal review. They offered no timeline. No evidence. No access to the prisoners. It was a stall. A brush-off. A message wrapped in bureaucracy. You don't matter anymore. That night, Admiral Carla Finch stood on the command deck of the TDF Vanguard, flagship of the 3rd Carrier Group. She was a woman of few words and sharp instincts. Her dark hair was pulled back, her uniform crisp. Around her, holographic displays showed fleet positions across the Orion perimeter. She'd been waiting for this moment. Admiral, said her operations officer, President's office just cleared Phase 2. Carla nodded. Signal all ships. Execute Silent Shield. Across the sector, 3 carrier groups, 27 warships in total, began to move. Not toward Krell space, not toward the Council station, but into high orbit around key human colonies and trade lanes. Their weapons stayed cold. Their comms stayed dark, but their presence was unmistakable. Huge, silent shapes hanging in the void like wolves circling a den. The galaxy noticed. News feeds lit up with speculation. The Zarathi demanded an explanation. The Mirathi called it a destabilizing show of force. But the Krell went quiet. Very quiet. On Krell Prime, the High Command debated what to do. Some urged defiance. Others whispered that humanity was no longer the easy target they'd assumed. After all, Earth had walked away from the Council without begging. Now it was moving fleets without warning. What else were they capable of? Back on Earth, Mara Lynn met with Dr. Owen Pierce in a secure basement room beneath Geneva. Owen looked tired but excited. I found more, he said, pulling up a new data stream on his screen. Operation Iron Veil wasn't just about trade and politics. They were planning to cut Earth off from helium-3 sources in the outer belts, starve our fusion reactors, force us to beg for energy. Mara's blood ran cold. When? Within the year, Owen said. But they didn't count on us going silent. Without our data feeds, their timing is off. They're guessing now. Mara took the report straight to Nora. By dawn, new orders went out. All civilian helium-3 mining operations were to switch to encrypted channels and reroute shipments through Mars and Titan. Reserve stockpiles on Luna were tripled. Earth would not be starved. Meanwhile, on a cold Krell prison moon, Eli Brooks sat in a dim cell, his wrists raw from cuffs. He hadn't been beaten yet, but the message was clear. He was a pawn, a warning. But Eli wasn't broken. He whispered to Rosa through the wall. They think we're alone. They don't know Earth's watching, and Earth was watching. Admiral Finch's fleet held position, not threatening, not retreating, just there. A silent promise. Harm one of ours, and you answer to all of us. The council called another emergency session. This time even the Marathi seemed uneasy. Species that had mocked humanity's withdrawal now wondered if they'd made a mistake. The humans weren't shouting. They weren't pleading. They were acting. And in the language of power, action spoke louder than any speech. Nora Hayes received a private message from Chair Vexelorn. Not through official channels. Not with fanfare. Just a simple text. We urge restraint. The situation can still be resolved peacefully. She didn't reply, because peace, she now understood, wasn't given. It was earned, and sometimes it had to be defended in silence. Dr. Owen Pierce rarely left his office. Tucked deep in the Interstellar Communications Bureau beneath Geneva, his workspace was a cave of blinking screens, tangled cables, and half-empty coffee cups. He wasn't a soldier or a diplomat. He was a listener. For years he had studied alien languages, not just their words, but their silences, their rhythms, the way they hid meaning in pauses and code. And now that skill had become Earth's sharpest weapon. It started with a whisper, a fragment of a Zorathi transmission, buried in routine traffic from a relay near the Marathi border. Most analysts would have dismissed it as noise. But Owen heard something else, a pattern, a rhythm that matched old Marathi command protocols. He isolated the signal, ran it through decryption layers, and found a single phrase repeated like a heartbeat. Iron Veil holds. He dug deeper. Cross-referenced dates, matched voice modulations, traced energy signatures. Slowly, the truth emerged. Operation Iron Veil wasn't just a rumor. It was real, and it was far worse than anyone had guessed. The plan had 3 phases. First, isolate Earth diplomatically, paint them as unstable, emotional, untrustworthy. That had worked. The Council had turned against them without even realizing they were being led. Second, strangle their economy. Block key trade routes, inflate tariffs, sabotage supply chains. That was already happening. Freighters like the Marlowe were being targeted not by accident but by design. Third, and most dangerous, cut off Earth's access to helium-3, the fuel that powered their cities, their ships, their very survival. Without it, Earth would be forced to crawl back to the Council on its knees, begging for scraps. Owen worked for 3 straight days without sleep. His eyes burned. His hands shook. But he kept going. He found encrypted logs showing secret meetings between Marathi and Zorathi High Command. He uncovered falsified incident reports blaming human ships for attacks they never committed. He even traced the order to detain Eli Brooks back to a joint directive signed by both species under the guise of Council Security Protocol. When he finally walked out of his office, it was dawn. He carried a single data chip in his pocket. He didn't go to his supervisor. He went straight to Mara Lynn. She met him in a quiet corner of the Bureau's cafeteria, far from listening devices. Owen handed her the chip without a word. She plugged it into her secure slate. As she read, her face went still, then pale, then hard. "This changes everything," she said. "I know," Owen replied. "They didn't just want us out of the room. They wanted us broken." Mara took the evidence directly to President Nora Hayes. They met in the Situation Room, lights dimmed, doors sealed. Nora read every line, watched every decoded transmission, listened to every intercepted voice. When she finished, she sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "So it wasn't paranoia," she said. "It was strategy." "Exactly," Mara said. "They used the Council like a mask. While we played by the rules, they rewrote them behind our backs." Nora called an emergency meeting with General Paul Dawson and Admiral Carla Finch. This time, there was no debate, no hesitation. The proof was undeniable. Humanity hadn't abandoned diplomacy because it failed. It had abandoned it because the game was rigged from the start. Within hours, new orders went out across the Terran Federation. All civilian helium-3 mining operations switched to encrypted channels and rerouted through Mars, Titan, and the outer asteroid belts. Reserve stockpiles on Luna were tripled. Independent traders loyal to Earth were given priority clearance and protection. The economic noose the Marathi and Zarathi had tried to tighten began to loosen. But the real shift was in public understanding. Until now, many citizens had wondered if the withdrawal had been too extreme. Now, with the truth revealed, doubt turned to resolve. News feeds across Earth, Mars, and the colonies broadcast summaries of the findings, carefully edited to protect sources, but clear enough to show the betrayal. People gathered in town squares, in shipyards, and orbital stations, not with fear, but with quiet anger. They had trusted the galaxy. The galaxy had lied. Captain Eli Brooks and his crew were still imprisoned on the Krell moon, but their names were now on every news channel. "Free the Marlow" became a quiet slogan, painted on freighter hulls and whispered in dockside bars. The Krell, sensing the shift, grew nervous. Their jailers stopped ignoring the prisoners. They brought better food, allowed limited exercise. They knew the tide was turning. Admiral Finch's fleet remained in position along the Orion perimeter, silent and unmoving. But now their presence wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. Earth knew the truth, and Earth was ready. Back in Geneva, Nora Hayes stood before a small group of trusted advisors. "We don't need to rejoin the Council," she said. "We don't need their approval. But we do need to make sure no one else falls into their trap." She authorized a new initiative, the Open Channel Project. Using old diplomatic frequencies and neutral relays, Earth began broadcasting raw, unedited data about Council actions, trade blocks, secret meetings, false reports to every independent system, every minor species, every colony that had been ignored, not as propaganda, just as facts. Let them see what the Council really was. The effect was immediate. On the fringe worlds, species that had once looked to the Council for guidance now questioned its motives. Trade deals between neutral systems and Earth surged. Even some former Council members, small, voiceless delegations, began sending quiet messages of thanks. They had suspected the truth but lacked proof. Now they had it. Owen Pierce returned to his office, exhausted but satisfied. He wasn't a hero. He didn't want medals or speeches. He just wanted the truth to be heard. And for the first time in months, he allowed himself to sleep. Meanwhile, deep beneath the red sands of Mars, Project Aegis hummed to full power. Its final test had succeeded. The shield could now envelop the entire Sol system in an invisible barrier, undetectable until activated. Earth was no longer just watching. It was protected. The galaxy had thought humanity's silence meant weakness. Now they were learning it meant something else entirely. Clarity, purpose, strength born not from shouting, but from knowing exactly who your enemies are. And somewhere in a cold cell on a distant moon, Eli Brooks heard a new sound through the walls, the faint, steady beep of a Krell Guard's comm unit. Then silence. Then footsteps. He didn't know it yet, but help was coming. Not with guns or demands, but with truth. And truth, he realized, might be the most powerful weapon of all. 1 year after Leo Grant walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, the galaxy had changed in ways no one had predicted. The Council still met, still issued statements, still claimed to speak for peace, but its voice had grown weaker. Species that once waited for its rulings now made their own choices. Trade flowed through new routes, bypassing old checkpoints, and at the center of it all stood Earth. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniably present like a mountain that refused to move. The turning point came quietly. A Krell security outpost near the Cygnus border suffered a sudden systems failure. Not an attack, not sabotage, just a cascade of glitches that shut down comms, navigation, and weapons for 12 hours. During that window, a small unmarked shuttle slipped into the prison moon's orbit, landed in a blind spot, and extracted Captain Eli Brooks and his crew. By the time the Krell restored power, the humans were gone, vanishing into the void like ghosts. No demands were made. No credits exchanged. Just a clean, silent rescue that left the Krell humiliated and the galaxy wondering how Earth had done it. Back on Earth, Eli and his crew were welcomed not with parades but with quiet respect. They were debriefed, given time to heal, and offered new roles if they wanted them. Eli chose to return to the stars, this time as a scout, for the newly formed Independent Trade Alliance, a loose network of human and non-human systems that traded outside council control. He carried no weapons, only a data chip filled with verified routes and trusted contacts. His ship, the New Marlow, became a symbol, small, fast, and free. The council tried to respond. Chair Vexlorn called for unity, for renewed dialogue, for healing the rift, but fewer species listened. The Marathi and Zarathi, once confident in their control, now spoke in hushed tones. Their secret plan had failed. Worse, it had been exposed. Independent systems they once dismissed now traded openly with Earth. Even some of their own allies began asking uncomfortable questions. Why had they pushed so hard against humanity? What were they really afraid of? Earth gave no grand speeches. It made no threats. It simply existed, strong, self-reliant, and watchful. The Terran Defense Fleet maintained its patrols along the Orion perimeter, but never crossed into contested space. Project Aegis remained active but hidden, a silent shield no one could see until it was needed. On Mars, Luna, and Titan, shipyards worked day and night, not building warships but freighters, research vessels, and colony transports. Humanity was expanding, not through conquest but through connection. Smaller species noticed. The insectoid Vexi, long ignored by the Council, sent a delegation to Titan. They didn't ask for protection. They asked for partnership. Earth agreed, offering engineering aid in exchange for rare minerals. The amphibious Lorne, struggling to rebuild after a civil war, received medical supplies from a human relief ship, no strings attached. Word spread. Earth helped not to gain favor, but because it was right. In Geneva, President Nora Hayes watched these developments from her office. She no longer looked tired. Her eyes held a calm certainty. The fear that had gripped Earth in the early days was gone, replaced by something steadier, confidence. Not arrogance, just the quiet knowledge that they had made the right choice. Mara Lynn now led the Office of External Relations, a new department created to manage Earth's growing ties with independent systems. She worked long hours, but she smiled more. They used to think we needed them, she told Owen Pierce during a rare coffee break. Now they're starting to wonder if they need us. Owen, still buried in data streams, had found a new purpose. He trained a team of young linguists to monitor not just council traffic, but the whispers of fringe worlds, the hopes, fears, and dreams of species the galaxy had forgotten. Earth was no longer just listening to power. It was listening to people. The final shift came not from Earth but from the Council itself. During a routine session, the Sylth delegate stood and announced they would no longer recognize Council rulings that affected human-adjacent systems. The Krell protested, but their voice lacked its old force. Then the Vexi spoke up, followed by the Lorne, then 3 other minor species. One by one, they declared they would handle their own affairs, with or without Council approval. The chamber, once a symbol of unity, now felt like a museum of fading influence. Chair Vexlorn did not argue. It simply pulsed a soft gray, the color of resignation, and adjourned the session early. On Earth, no one celebrated. There was no victory speech, just a quiet understanding that the galaxy had entered a new era, one where power wasn't held by a single council, but shared among those willing to act with honesty and courage. That evening, Nora Hayes stood alone on the balcony of her residence, looking up at the stars. The city lights of Geneva shimmered below, but her eyes were on the sky. Somewhere out there, human ships sailed through uncharted space. Somewhere, a child on a distant colony learned to speak both English and Sylth. Somewhere, a trader named Eli Brooks shared a meal with beings who once saw humans as loud and reckless, but now saw them as friends. She thought of Leo Grant, living quietly in the woods, probably fishing or reading. She thought of the crew of the Marlow, safe and free. She thought of the engineers on Mars, the linguists in Geneva, the farmers on New Carthage. Humanity hadn't won a war. It hadn't conquered anyone. It had simply chosen to stand on its own terms, and in doing so had earned something far more valuable than a seat at a rigged table: respect. A soft chime came from inside. Her aide stood in the doorway. "Madam President, Project Aegis is fully operational. All sectors report green," Nora nodded. "Good, keep it ready." But I don't think we'll need it. She turned back to the stars. The galaxy was still vast, still dangerous, still full of unknowns. But Earth was no longer a guest in someone else's house. It was home, and no one would tell them how to live in it again. Let them wonder what we'll do next, she thought. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled.